Goal setting is the master skill of successful people. We go to school for many years and we're taught all sorts of things, but very little time in our education is spent on the absolute core, powerful driver for many successful people, which is the ability and the skills to be able to make pictures of future success that are so compelling to us that they drive us and encourage us and fuel us to get there. Defining what the good looks like, what great looks like for you in the future is massively important. There's a fable. It was told to me by a man called Jack Black, a man called Brian Tracy, these big success gurus. And the fable goes along these lines. In 1953, at Yale University, all the students of a particular year, that year, were asked to answer questions about their sporting life, their academic life, all sorts of questions about how they lived and breathed. One of the questions was, do you have any goals? And they found that 10% of the students leaving in 1953 had a clear picture of the future for themselves. 4% had written down their goals. They'd taken the trouble, the effort or whatever, to put that on paper, a proper decision. In 1973, they went and found as many of these students as they could, just to see whether the habits that they had in 1953 had impacted on their lives 20 years later, only to find that the 4% who had written their goals down, each one of the 4% is fabled to have had more money as an individual than the rest of the 96% put together by 1973. Now that just seems stunning. I'm not sure it's true. I've searched to see if that's true, but I can't find a lot of evidence for it. But I believe in the sentiment, absolutely, that you make a picture of the future and hold it dear and keep working towards it. You're way more likely to get closer to it than if you hadn't made such a picture. In essence, I think that's it. I once asked Paula Radcliffe's father, now, when did you first realise that your daughter was going to be a formidable athlete? When did you first know that your daughter was going to be astonishing? And he said, a lot of people ask me that, Marcus. The truth is, she was never an athlete at school. She was no fantastic runner. She didn't win any sports day medals, never represented the school in anything, until she went to secondary school. But she was, Marcus, a bloody-minded, stubborn little so-and-so, who when she'd made up her mind to do something, that was it. She said she was a nightmare to parent, but truth is, she really did have that bloody-mindedness. And by the time she went to secondary school, she came home from school one day and said, Dad, we did cross-country today, and I came second. You know, you keep saying to me, what am I going to be when I grow up? I now know. I'm going to be a long-distance runner. We said, yes, dear, you carry on. But he said to me, I think the secret is, Marcus, that she made a picture. And he went like this. He said, she made a picture which she wouldn't negotiate. When she was that little, she made a picture which she's been running towards ever since. And if you ask me, that's the secret of it. He said lots of children have pictures, dreams, aspirations, and oftentimes they wither on the vine and something gets in the way and they dissolve. But Paula just kept her picture alive. And that's her secret. Now that sounds very simple, just like writing your goals down sounds ever so simple. But I think it's the essence of it, actually. Einstein said, simplicity is on the far side of complexity. And I think there's something about the simplicity of knowing what we really, really want, that we're prepared to work for, is huge. And so I'll say to you, what's your picture for 2012? What's your picture for 20 years out? In 10 years' time, 5 years' time, what would you love to have, be, see, do? And I just think that's the question. I also think, is your picture, the one you've made or are making, big enough? Is it aspirational enough? Because that's the thing about the human brain. It's like a supercomputer that answers the questions that are asked of it. And depending on the size of the question, is the response. In other words, we'll find some phenomenal answers to some of the global warming challenges we have. We'll find some amazing innovations just because we're asking questions which we've never asked before, proper big ones. I think if we ask really big things of our minds and our souls, we end up getting way closer to them than if we didn't stretch that way. If we ask small things, same happens. If you don't have a picture, if you go through a period of time where you're vague, the trouble with that is other people start making pictures for you. You know, there may be children in school today who are already having a teacher put a frame around their picture. This is about as far as you can go. Given what your parents have done or what you're like in mathematics, you're not likely to go much further than this, and they're already limiting I think the challenge for us is to break out of those limits and be dreamers, have proper aspirations which are way beyond what other people would tell us is reasonable. It's a bit like, I don't know if you ever saw this email come fluttering around a few years ago, but that one there from Cambridge University. Just have a quick read. Amazing how fast you do it, isn't it? How quickly your brain unscrambles those words. It's in a jiffy. Now, first question is, how do you do it so fast? Your answer is probably going to be, well, you've got context, and that helps you, but also because you get the first and the last letter. But hang on a second. You got the first word before you had any context. You didn't know what this was about, but you read it anyway straight away. That first and the last letter thing, really important. Perhaps when you get home this evening, you could just jot on a piece of paper a 3-syllable word. Say a word like that, and jot it down and give it to your friend or partner, and ask them, what does that say? As long as you give them the first letter and the last letter, they'll get it instantly. And why is that? Well, just because the brain seems to reorder everything due to that pattern. Now, if you then give them another 3-syllable word, and this time take the last letter out and embed it in the word, or the first letter, embed it in the word, so they don't have a start point or a finish point that's defined, then ask them to sort that one out. They'll probably say, could you give me a pen and paper? This is like doing countdown. I need to do an anagram here. And they'll take ages. They think differently. They're using a different set of thought patterns entirely. And that's the metaphor I'd like to really embed here. The idea that if you know where you are, and you make a picture of where you'd like to be, your brain will unscramble the stuff in between in ways which you can't explain. You can't explain them because explanation belongs to the side of the brain that does the anagrams. It's just that if you never had the last letter in place, you'd never get the beauty of the brain finding its way there. We'd be thinking our way through life, arguing about why things don't work or why things do work. And I think that's it. In a nutshell, I work with companies, and some companies are doing ever so well in the same industry as others that aren't. And I think, what's the difference? Oftentimes it's because the leaders and managers and people in the business have got a view of where they're going, which is deeply embedded, and others have a vague notion. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that this guarantees success. All I'm saying is, if you have a picture and you're really secure about it, what it does is just drive your determination ever so strongly. If there's 2 athletes on the edge of Manchester today, for example, and one of them is running round a track and with a hallucination in their head about going to the next Olympics, and the other has a rather vague notion of what's going to happen with their athletics, I just think the one with the hallucination is more likely to be training harder today, listening to their coach a bit more intently, prepared to drink water as opposed to beer tonight, rise early tomorrow morning and have another go, and in time get way closer to their potential. I think that's it. I think we get driven by the size and the quality of the picture we make for ourselves. And I think there are some rather spooky, strange, weird things that happen when people make their definition of future success. So Paula Radcliffe worked for her. So I was doing a workshop recently, and a gentleman in the workshop said, when I was a kid, I wrote a letter to Jimmy Savile. He used to run this program on TV, Jim Will Fix It. This man, rather strange character, will fix your dreams. You write a letter, and he'll do his best to make it happen for you. This boy wrote a letter. In those days, there'd been a TV program called Jacques Cousteau's Undersea World, and this boy was besotted by the idea of seeing dolphins and being with Jacques Cousteau. So he wrote a letter to Jimmy Savile, who didn't reply. Now, the rule on the TV program was, if you write to Jimmy, Jimmy will fix it, or he'll definitely reply. This boy spent the next weekend, the weekend after, and at the age of 10, wrote 10, 15 letters. Each week, no reply. His mother said, for goodness sake, the series would have been finished by now, and you've got to give up. But imagine that, 10 years of age, embedding that picture at least 10 times. He said, but as it happened, I never had my dream come true with Jacques Cousteau. Jacques Cousteau's died now and been and gone. But funny thing was, though, a couple of years ago, I did become a diver. He said, I became a deep-sea diver. I mean, I can dive with nitrox. I'm qualified to dive as deep as you can go. And but a couple of years ago, I was taking a dive off Canada in a special party. And as we were met on the quayside there, I met a couple of other divers. We were going to watch killer whales underwater, and I shook hands with Jean-Michel Cousteau, Jack's son. So I got pretty close, he said. But I think there are extraordinary things. I think it's interesting that Ellen MacArthur, you know, the great sailor, she's done fantastic things in sailing. She was 6 years of age when she said to her parents, she lived in a landlocked, near Birmingham, landlocked place, never been in a boat before, said to her mother, one day, I'm going to sail across the Atlantic. I'm going to be a famous sailor. And curious how that little dream stayed, nurtured and nourished and came true for her. I worked with a person who knew Tim Haynes, and she said the fabled story in their family, absolutely true actually, was that when Tim was 10 years of age, his mother came down the stairs and said, Tim, what are you watching TV for? You've spent the whole holiday watching television and playing with your toys. Why don't you do some reading? He said, I love TV. One day I'm going to make TV programs. I'm going to make TV programs about my dinosaurs. And years later, he became the man who produced Walking with Dinosaurs. There was no media blood in the family, no history or background in that profession at all. But interesting how the picture may drive the behaviour. So what pictures do we have? Just being completely frank with you, I've got a daughter who, well, we were told when she was 11, imagine being told this as a parent, your child is not grammar school material. She's never going to be university quality. She's just going to be one of those children who just is going to muddle through her academic life. That's what we were told, and we accepted that, I suppose. But I think the teachers probably treated Charlotte as though she wasn't going to make it, and I think it's probably a bit tough on her. They probably put a frame around her aspirations. Anyway, the funny thing was that my wife and I, we thought this was humorous. We overheard her one day talking to another girl, and Charlotte was 13 or 14 by this time, and her friend said, Charlotte, have you thought about going to university? And Charlotte said, no, not really. Why? And this girl said, oh, well, I want to go to Durham. I'm going to go to Durham University. It's rather good. My father went there. Then Charlotte said, well, actually, I think I'm going to go to Oxford. And the girl said, why Oxford in particular? Charlotte said, because they've got this fantastic Primark there. I mean, I've never seen a Primark as big as the one they've got in Oxford. I mean, that must be the place to go. And funny how sometimes you might make a daft aspiration. But the really curious thing about it is, 2 weeks ago, Charlotte had, she's now 18, she had a 2-day interview at Merton College to go to Oxford. She didn't pass, by the way. She didn't get through the interview, but you know, she's going to do okay. She's going to go to university somewhere, and I think somewhere in there, her little picture grew quite strongly. I think probably the line in her interview about Primark probably blew it for her, but that's another story.